evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott, and it is political season, as I'm sure you know, and one of our guests, a frequent guest of ours who has decided to come back and grace us with her presence once again, is Karen Yarbrough, State Representative and candidate for Recorder of Deeds in Cook County. Karen, thank you so much for coming back.
It's a pleasure to have you. Always a pleasure, always a pleasure.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the race for a recorder. You will have an opponent in November.
Yes,
right?
yes.
But I'm sure you're ready to handle that situation?
Yes, we are. You know, we ran in the primary unopposed, and we ran hard in the primary, even though we didn't have an opponent. There was no empty chair, though. There was no empty chair. But I thought it was important
Well, Clint only does that for the Republicans, so on the Democratic side,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know. But anyway, I just thought it was really important for me to get out to all of the townships and certainly the wards, because I don't know everybody. And so as many events as I could go to during the primary, that's what I've done. And all summer long, after the primary, I've been going to events and meeting with people in the townships in particular, the ones that I haven't had, any exposure in. So you would have seen me in the parades. I did 3 4th of July parades. What a hoot!
3 on the same day.
And it was a really hot day too.
Yeah.
But it was really great to touch people and to actually have some in-depth conversations even on that day with some folks about what we want to do in the recorder's office. So having an opponent, I've had opponents before, and I think I have a record that speaks for itself. I spent 12 years in Springfield, gotten lots of things done, and we've got a plan for the recorder's office.
Well, coming back to something you said just a moment ago, which I think is worth noting, when you talked about being out a lot and meeting people and actually touching people and having these in-depth conversations, and there's an image of politicians, especially today, as being aloof and just sitting in their office and living in some sort of ivory tower that has nothing or little to do with the lives of everyday Americans. But here you are out literally out on the streets, walking with the parades and meeting real people. So what do you learn from that?
Kevin, I've always thought that, if you want to represent people, you got to kind of like them first. But more than that, I think you have to listen to them. And I've done that in my entire career, knocking on doors, just to listen, to hear what people are talking about. You've got to keep your ear to the ground if you want to represent people. Now, I know there are candidates, they pretty much, run their campaigns from on high, meaning they've got handlers and all those kinds of things. There's nothing for me to show up at an event by myself. I don't want people to think that I'm untouchable. So many times candidates become untouchable, especially after they get the office, then you never see them again, and then until election time.
And suddenly, there they are.
Yeah, that's not, I've never wanted to portray that kind of candidate, and certainly not elected official. I ran on a platform as a state rep, being accessible and accountable, and I'm running on that same platform. People won't have to look for me when I go to the recorder's office. I will be there.
In fact, when you talk about going out without handlers, I know one of your close associates and something of a mentor, Congressman Danny Davis, is famous for that, and will show up at people's homes when they're having small gatherings, just by himself with no handlers. And I have to say, as having seen that and witnessed that myself, it has such an effect on people that this is not a scripted entrance. There's no one there to watch what he says or give him cues. He's just there to meet people and find out what they're thinking about.
Yeah, Danny Davis, many times I've had to introduce him. I always introduce him as his name being synonymous with public service. Danny doesn't care if it's one person or 1,000 people. He'll come, he'll speak, he'll connect with people, and then he follows up. And for a congressman, they represent several 100,000 people. And for him to have as much time and the desire to just talk to one as he does for 10,000. Now, he speaks all across the country, and certainly now with the Obama campaign, he's one of the most sought-after speakers to go into the battleground states to speak to people.
Well, he is a great public speaker. Anyone
yes,
who's heard him in public knows.
Yeah, he really is. Actually, when I'm on program, I always tell people, can you put me before Danny Davis? He's an excellent speaker. But more than that, like I said, I admire him so much because his life has been a life of public service, and it's been a life of service. He cares about everyday man on the street, woman on the street, and he meets needs wherever he finds them.
Well, we were talking about charismatic speakers, and you were just at a fairly big event in Charlotte where there were a couple of charismatic speakers themselves, right?
You must be talking about the Democratic National Convention.
In fact.
Wow. This was my second convention. In the first convention in Denver, I was pretty much a spectator. It was lots to see, though, and it was my first convention, and it was pretty cool. Here was a guy running for president that I actually knew and knew personally and worked with in Springfield. So I was really excited about going to the convention in Denver. This time I had an active role. I was a whip, and so without the the apparatus, but there
would have been bad visuals on TV.
There were about 5 of us, and our job was to, and Illinois was front and center.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
of course,
president
right. Sure.
come from Illinois, so you're front and center. So we were front and center, and our job was to make sure those who had tickets had seats, those who had tickets and didn't have seats, to make sure that if there were people moving around, mm-hmm. that you could give them that opportunity mm-hmm. to have that seat, making some decisions that maybe weren't so cool with some folks, managing egos, all those kinds of things.
There are egos in politics?
Yeah,
a
little bit. But what a cast of outstanding speakers. People have asked me since I've been back, who do you think was the best speaker? Absolutely stunning. And I got a chance to work with her with a service project. So there were about 100 of us who went with her and Jill Biden. We went to another, at the convention hall, and we actually wrote letters to the troops and put together care packages. And there was Michelle right there putting stuff in the bags with us and writing the letters. So, of course, I know Michelle from the 04 campaign, from the 08 campaign, and it was just nice reconnecting with mm-hmm. her and then doing something that matters. I mean, she really cares about the troops and their families, and she does these service projects wherever she goes. So this was a mountaintop experience for me. I got back and heard from lots of folks, I saw you on TV. And which
I did, of course.
Yeah, but then there were others, I didn't see you. Oh, it was because I was all over the place, But I think for the Democrats, this was absolutely one of the best conventions to kind of hit home. I mean, if you listen to all of the speeches, there were some reoccurring themes, getting across to people what this election is about. And I think Bill Clinton probably said it best. He talked about, the economy and all kinds of things. He talked about when he became president and what he was faced with. And he said that in 4 years, you could get some things done, mm-hmm. but certainly not himself, not any other president could turn this whole thing around in 4 years. And Obama deserves another 4 years to continue the work that he started. And when you go down a list of things that he's actually gotten done during the course of these 4 years, it's phenomenal. And I think Democrats needed to hear that message.
Well, Democrats need to say that because there's been a counter-narrative that's been out that really paints a completely different picture. And I think the Democrats, up until the convention, had not been as effective as they needed to be in conveying an alternative picture.
I would agree with that. And I think they hit a home run because each speaker who came from maybe a little different perspective. You know, the nun that spoke, Michelle that spoke, of course, Bill Clinton, and of course the president. I mean, once he got to speak, everybody had said pretty much it all. So we're like, what is he going to say? You know,
right.
But he had an excellent speech as well. But I think the Democrats needed this, and I just came from a meeting just a few minutes ago, and people are fired up. They're ready to go.
Well, what struck me most about the convention was that despite what's happened in the 4 years and the clear obstructionism that comes out from the Congress and the inability of the president to move some things forward because the Congress simply won't act on things that would benefit him.
Sure.
They'd also benefit the country, by the way, but that's not okay because it might benefit the president. But despite all that, and despite the vitriol that has come out about him and the veiled racism and the whole package, nonetheless, you heard an extremely positive, upbeat message and still holding to the idea of cooperation as the way to get things done. And I was really moved by that despite all of this so-called gridlock, which I think really comes largely from one side of the aisle,
sure.
And the really harsh rhetoric, both the president and Bill Clinton both talked about harmony and cooperation as the correct path forward. And you didn't hear that from the Republican convention.
You know, Kevin, that's who Barack Obama is. I served with him in Springfield, and I just remember when he was running for U.S. Senate, and he was, you know, kind of finishing out his state Senate career, and he had a bunch of bills that he was, you know, trying to get passed, and of course they passed because, you know,
he was Barack,
yeah.
Right?
But even though Dan Hines was his opponent, you know, and Dan, of course, is, I think they call him Lace Curtain. Now, you could tell me more about that kind of stuff. Lace Curtain Irish. Okay, so that's what I learned about that. Lace Curtain Irish, and he was the anointed one that was supposed to be the person who was going to go. And the way Barack handled, because he and Dan had a relationship, he was never mean or nasty to Dan. They were opponents. Everybody can't win. Only one person is going to win. But I watched him and the way he dealt with Dan and the way he has dealt with other opponents. He's just not a nasty person. He's just not. And I've watched the way he forged relationships across the aisle to get legislation passed. And maybe sometimes, I know in my own case with legislation and working across the aisle, it's not so much the legislation that you have, but it's, you know, how do people perceive you and what's your reputation?
And what are the relationships that you build? As you know, politics, as you know, often described as the art of the possible or the art of compromise.
Sure.
And it's a matter of building relationships with people who will trust you.
Yes.
If you're across the aisle from someone and this guy comes to you with something that he wants you to sign on to and you don't know him or you may not sure you can trust him,
sure,
you're going to want to read that bill with a fine-tooth comb.
For sure.
On the other hand, if you've built a successful relationship with someone over the years, then they can come to you and you know that they're not feeding you a line.
That's right.
This is something you can
so
trust.
Trust has a lot to do with it. I know you know that I passed the the abolition bill.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell people about that bill and how we got it passed, it was the downstaters that protected me. Now they weren't supportive of the bill,
mm-hmm.
not at all. But when the bill failed by one point, I mean there was one vote it failed by, and I'm running around trying to find out where am I going to get this vote. Oh my goodness, and then somebody says, oh Karen, I can't vote for it again, and the downstaters came to me and said, Karen, we're not going to let your bill fail. I didn't know where the votes were going to come. They said, call
mm-hmm.
the bill. Call the bill. And I did. I trusted them.
They weren't setting you up.
They did not set me up. They told me we will not let your bill fail. And it's the downstate Democrats who helped me with that bill.
And so here's another case where Chicago versus downstate. Everyone pictures that as this irreconcilable conflict.
Mm-hmm.
But you were able to reach literally across the aisle to another faction of the Democratic Party and make that work, right?
Yeah, well, there are all kinds of factions. I mean, we're upstaters and downstaters. We're black, we're white, we're Hispanic, we're Democrats, we're Republicans, we're female, we're male. There's all kinds of differences. And then you come from different ideologies. So to get 60 people, to, 59 people to support a measure to get it over to the Senate is
it's
tough.
An achievement, right?
It's tough. It's tough sometimes, and you can get down. That bill passed by 60 votes. Only 60 votes. So, I mean, you have to get along. But getting back to Barack Obama, that's who he is. Working with people who are unlike him, finding what you have in common, explaining or getting them to understand what you're trying to do. That's who he is.
Well, one other thing I've noticed in the convention, the central role that former President Bill Clinton played in it with the Democrats, and the absence of George W. Bush at the Republican convention. So I look at that and I think the Democrats are consciously making this picture of continuity. Look, these things that worked well in the past, the last time we had a Democratic president, and by the way, if people have forgotten, the country was in pretty good shape when Bill Clinton was in the White House. And I think he summed up very succinctly when he said, the argument on the other side is, well, we left him a mess, and he hasn't cleaned it up fast enough, so fire him and put us back in, which I think does encapsulate what the message is from the other side. So here we're drawing the continuity between the last really good times in America when the economy was going well and politics, always ugly but tolerable, and making that connection to the current president, where the Republicans were unable to do that. And their last president in office, who was in office when the financial catastrophe exploded, was nowhere to be seen. And it struck me that the Democrats are consciously making a connection to the past and showing that there is continuity of this thinking and that it succeeds. And the Republicans seem to be disowning their own past.
So you noticed that.
Yeah, I did in fact see
and
that.
I think many other people did too. I mean, conversations that I've had since I've been back from the convention have been along that line. People forget. People get wrapped up in their own lives and they're just not paying attention to a lot of things. What's going on in Chicago right now with the teachers' strike, it gets people's attention, so people go to work and they come home and they pay their bills and they send their kids to school and that's their life. So all these other things around it, community, your church, your, sororities, your fraternities, all of these other things that you're involved, those are extraneous to that little household of viewers. But most people, that's what they're concerned about.
Sure, well, it takes a lot of time and energy just to make that little area work right.
Yeah, so to ask somebody about what's happening in Washington, well, I don't know. I think they say they don't work together. So they read a headline somewhere. Yeah, Washington is broken and they don't work together. Okay, so what's happened at the state? Oh, the state's broke. Oh, okay. And what's happened at the county? Well, it seems like they're moving some things around. They're trying to reform. Oh, reform, that's the word. They're trying to reform the county. And so what's going on locally? I think they're broke too. So that's the kind of conversation that you have with people. But it's up to, I think, us to tell our story. And I think the story for the Democrats was told very succinctly. I mean, there was a chain of speech that went forward. I think that people got it. I think people are energized and excited. And if they do nothing else, they can vote in November for President Barack Obama for a second term.
And in fact, they should register to vote as well. The final day for voter registration is October 9th. So people need to make sure they're registered and vote in the November election.
I would agree. I just left the meeting talking about voters registration. And in Proviso Township, we have a goal and we plan to, that's what they were talking about tonight. People brought those yellow cards in, so we're going to be getting them in.
Now, speaking of voter registration, and since we're on the national, looking at the national scene, there's a lot going on in terms of what the Republicans call voter ID laws and what the Democrats have, I think, rightfully called voter suppression laws. We fortunately don't see that in Illinois, but it could happen here. couldn't. I mean, not with the current political structure.
I was going to say that won't happen under the current administration. With Mike Madigan, I'm in leadership, so I'm in the room when we're talking about these bills that come up. And there are some people who have introduced some bills. Mm-hmm. We've got a shredder over in the corner for those bills. That's not anything that anybody, we don't want to suppress the vote. We do not. The other mm-hmm. thing, and since I'm glad you brought this up, because what I found, and I was out canvassing just 2 weeks ago, people who are ex-offenders, they've served their time, they've paid their debt, they come back, they think they can't register to vote. They think that we have a law in the books that says, you're done, mm-hmm. you know, and that's not the case. And so I wonder, you know, do I have to pass a law that makes corrections, tell people you can register to vote after you've served your time and paid your debt?
Maybe as they're being released, they fill out a voter registration card.
I'm with
How about that?
Maybe I could get that done before I leave.
Good idea. That's why you come on the show, Ken, so we can just trade ideas on things like that.
Yes, and I'm happy to put them into legislation and get them passed.
So, segue quickly to the recorder's office. This is you don't have a legislature to have to work with. You'll be the boss.
I will be.
So, what will be the things that you will try to, since you don't have to pass them, to accomplish?
Well, we may need legislation. We may need some legislation, but I know a few people in Springfield that will help me with that. I guess there are a few things that I want to quickly get to. One of them, the website, to me, is just not adequate.
So it's not serving the public in the way it needs to?
Not at all. Not. I mean, maybe it may serve somebody, but I know I have trouble with that website, and I think I know how to move around websites pretty well. There are, and I'm talking to people right now about some of those kinds of things. So that's one thing. I mean, that's what the public sees. The other thing is we have employees. We've got 195 employees there. And I've been in the office, and I kind of see the workflow. I have a meeting the next 4 weeks to go into 4 recorders' offices. I want to see what they're doing. There's some well-run recorders' offices. There's all kinds of things we can do. Things come to me in my head, you know, just from somewhere. So last night I was thinking, you know, they record the DD-214s.
Which is what?
A DD-214 is this document when a person comes back from the war or comes back out of the service. Mm-hmm. This is their document saying that they were there, you know, all kinds of information that they may need when they go to a job that gives them points for being veterans. They have to have that DD-214. Well, I don't know what you do at your house, but many people take really, you know, important documents. Things. They put them in a shoebox or something, or they might even put it in wherever they put it. They forgot where they put it, and they need that document. So they can file that DD-214 in the recorder's office. They'll always know where it is, and they'll be able to access it themselves at the recorder's office. But I thought about something else, and I haven't vetted this yet, so, you know, I just tell you what I've thought about. Your will. So you get a will done, you give it to your attorney, I guess, and then you keep a copy for yourself in that safety deposit box or that shoe box or whatever it is. What would preclude us from filing a will in the recorder's office? You know, you'd have to have some, you know, some way where nobody else gets to it except for you, and that's just a password, right? So you have a password.
Well, it's a little more than that, but that's a good start.
Okay, but why not a will? Why not record your will in the recorder's office? If you can record your deeds and record other things, why not your will? So I'm going to be fleshing that out and figuring out if we can do that or not. I think that I'm going to, instead of allowing this office to define me, I'm going to define this office. And it's going to be a place for, first of all, we're going to make sure we save the taxpayer some money. Secondly, we're going to make sure we give good service for the dollars that, you know, people are spending there. We're going to have a well-run office with people who know what they're doing because they're going to be trained. And we're going to use technology to do things. And we're going to have best practices in that office. So, Kevin, I'm excited. I can't wait to get there.
I can tell you're just all about jumping out of the chair right now.
I'm excited about what can we do there. And there are lots of smart people around who are advising me right now about what's possible. And there are recorders' offices all across the United States that are doing some really innovative kinds of things, and I want it in Cook County.
Well, I'm trusting that you, of all people, will be able to make that happen. So how are you going to finish up your term downstate? Because the election is November. Assuming that you are able to prevail, you would take office in early December, right?
Yes, yes.
So that only gives you a few months to wrap things up in Springfield.
Kevin, it only gives me 3 days. Veto session is the, I think either the last of November. Yeah, I think it's the last 3 days in November, and then there's 3 days in December. I won't be able to serve out the entire veto session, the last 3 days. So I have actually literally 3 days to serve. I have a bill that I've been working on that deals with, you know, banks, and it deals with foreclosure, and it deals with
That will generate some discussion downstate, I'm sure.
Yes. Oh yeah. But I've actually passed this bill in the House already, and it's in the Senate, and I'm going to help Senator Collins to get this through. That will be probably the last thing that I do, unless I'm able to, you know, quickly put something else together and get it done and get it out of the House. So 3 days.
Now also there will be a short period of time where you may need to appoint your successor for a brief period.
I do have the weighted vote to appoint my successor. I'll be stepping down the 1st of December, and there's a time between December and January, the second week in January, where the new person will be sworn in. So, the organization will come together, and we'll take a look at who's interested to go be state rep for, about a month.
For a month.
Yeah, and, we'll appoint someone.
And it's an odd position. The person will be there for 1 month, would take a few votes. How do you find someone who actually...
Kevin, it could be you.
I'm not volunteering. I just want you to know.
You find someone by, first of all, I've got some ideas already about you really need to find someone who understands something about this job and what they may, what votes may come up. Our district has to be represented. I don't want not one day where if I step down today, I want somebody appointed, So we'll do this legwork ahead of time, because I know that I'm going to step down if I'm fortunate enough to get elected in November. So we're just going to be looking for somebody who kind of knows their way around, knows the process, understands what's going to be required of them, and that'll be a nice deal for somebody.
And who shares the vision of where the community needs to go.
That's exactly right, for 1 month.
Well, on that note, we're already out of time. So
what happens to the time?
We have too much fun. That's the problem.
Okay.
So I know you'll be back again.
I will.
To take office. So till next time, Karen, I want to thank you for being my guest once again.
Kevin, it's always my pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me.
And thank you for watching Public Perspective once again. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. You can find us every Saturday night on Comcast Channel 19 at 8 o'clock. And you can also see us on the web at publicperspective.tv. Till next time, thank you and good night.